Hi everyone, welcome to Sri Sai online training. So today in Angular 9, we are going to discuss the following topics. So today, demo session 2 of Angular 9 with free TypeScript. So this is a demo session 2. We are going to discuss today what is Angular, okay, why we have to go for Angular, what are the Angular building blocks, and what are the different versions of the Angular. So these are the four important topics what we are going to discuss today in Angular 9 demo session 2. So in the last session we have discussed what is Angular, where we use Angular, what is TypeScript, what is framework. So today in demo session 2 we'll do a small extension to that. So today we'll try to understand why we have to go for Angular for developing dynamic web applications, and what are the Angular building blocks. We'll try to understand with a small diagram, and then what are the Angular versions and what is the latest version of the Angular. So let's start with what is Angular with a basic definition, and then we'll go to why we have to go for Angular. So let's try to understand what is Angular. Okay, so like we have already discussed what is Angular. So Angular is a client-side TypeScript framework. So Angular is a client-side TypeScript framework for developing dynamic web applications. So client-side TypeScript framework for developing dynamic web applications. Right. So what is web? So web is nothing but internet. And what is internet? Collection of websites. So we have different websites. Example, www.gmail.com, www.facebook.com, www.yahoo.com. So collection of all these websites makes up web. And what do you mean by app? App is nothing but application. App is nothing but application. So what is application? So application is nothing but collection of computer programs. Collection of computer programs. So if you want to develop any dynamic websites, or technically which are known as web applications, we have to use a technology, and that technology what we are using is Angular. So Angular is a client-side TypeScript framework for developing dynamic web applications. Okay, so this is what we discussed in the last session also. Now, why we have to use Angular when compared to other client-side technologies for developing dynamic web application? That's what we are going to understand now. Right. So now, before that, a small note point. What are the prerequisites for Angular? So before learning this Angular technology as a client-side framework, we should have a basic knowledge on HTML. So what does HTML stands for? Okay, so HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Hypertext Markup Language. So what is the use of this HTML? So HTML main use is presentation of data to the user in a web page. Presentation of data to the user in a web page. Okay, so whenever we are developing any web page, in that web page, if you want to make presentation of data, then we have to go for HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. Right, so this is what is HTML. So in HTML, we use different tags to do presentation of data in a web page. So for example, we use heading tags, we use body tag, we use head tags, we use bold tags, we use underline tags, we use table tags, we use list tags, etc. So using all these tags, we are going to do presentation of data in a web page. So heading tags are something like h1 to h6. Head tag is something like head opening, head closing. Next, body opening followed by body closing. Next, bolt. Next, we can use underline. Next, we can use table. Next, we can use list. So we have different types of list, something like unordered list, something like ordered list, something like definition list, etc. So using all these tags, we are going to do presentation of data to the user in a web page. Okay, next, coming to CSS. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets. So what is the use of CSS? Okay, so the main use of CSS is it will make our HTML web page more stylish, more interactive. Okay, so it will make our HTML web page more stylish, more colorful, more interactive. So if you want to make your web page stylish, colorful, and interactive, then we have to use CSS, cascading style sheets. Okay, so how to use CSS? So basically we use CSS using style tag, or we use CSS using style attributes. Example, so we can use something like color is blue followed by semicolon. We can use something like font size as something like 20 pixel. We can use something like border 2 pixel, border style solid, border color brown. Right, so these are some CSS properties. We call them as CSS properties. So using CSS properties, we can make our HTML web page, okay, more stylish, more colorful, more interactive. So this is what is the main use of HTML plus CSS. Next, the third one, okay, right? So the third one is, okay, JavaScript. Right, so JavaScript. So what is the use of JavaScript? So first of all, we have to understand HTML plus CSS does not have programming capability. Okay, programming capability. So programming capability means variables, operators, loops, conditional statements, functions, etc. So all these things makes up programming capability. So this programming capability is not available for HTML and CSS. So as an alternative, if we want to have programming capability, in our HTML web page. Then we have to go for JavaScript. Okay, JavaScript. Fine. So what is the use of JavaScript? So JS, JavaScript. So JavaScript is used to perform programming in web page. Okay, if you want to perform programming in a web page, okay, then we have to use JavaScript. Example, we can take something like this: variable a, something like 10. Variable b, we can take something like 4. Okay, now how to perform this addition of two numbers? So addition of two numbers we are going to do with script. Okay, so that script we are going to write it using script tag. Using script tag in a HTML web page. And inside that script tag we have to write one statement: document dot write ln, okay, something like addition is, okay, and here we can use plus followed by a plus b. So using this we can perform programming in a web page. Okay, so that is what is HTML, presentation of data. CSS, it will make our web page more stylish, colorful, interactive. And JavaScript, it is used to make our web page with programming capability, followed by TypeScript. Okay, and this TypeScript we are going to discuss first 1 week to 10 days free of cost. So because our complete Angular programming is based on TypeScript only. So finally we have to say one thing here: note. So the note point goes like this. So we can write one small formula: HTML plus CSS plus JavaScript. Okay, so these three are used to develop dynamic web applications. Dynamic web applications. And finally, coming to TypeScript. So TypeScript means it is something like this: it is JavaScript plus more programming capability. Okay, so TypeScript is nothing but JavaScript plus advanced programming capability. So advanced programming capability means we can use object oriented programming. So like we have object oriented programming in Java, .NET, C++ or Python. In the same way we can use object oriented programming capability using TypeScript. Okay, so this is how we are going to design a web page using HTML, CSS and TypeScript. So TypeScript is JavaScript plus extra capability of programming. So these three makes up developing dynamic web applications. Right, so these are the three prerequisites of Angular: HTML, CSS and JavaScript. And anyhow we are going to discuss free TypeScript for 1 week to 10 days. Okay, and 1 week is the maximum time, and after that I'm going to start with Angular. So that is how we are going to use HTML, CSS and JavaScript in our programming development, web application programming development using Angular. Now let us try to understand why we have to go for Angular. Okay, right, so we already have Angularjs. Okay, so when compared to Angularjs, why we have to prefer Angular technically? Okay, right, so the first reason when Angular was introduced, okay, the first reason when Angular was introduced in 2016, Angular is 5 times faster when compared to Angularjs. Angular is 5 times faster when compared to Angularjs. Right, And second thing is Angular is cross-platform. So Angular applications can run in personal computers or desktop computers, laptops, mobile devices, TVs. So this is the main advantage of Angular. So Angular applications, they can directly run on any size of devices, on any operating system which is supporting a browser, right? And Angular applications are easy to implement. So once we know the core concepts of Angular, we can develop an Angular applications very quick, very fast, and simple. So easy to implement. Okay. And next thing, why we have to go for Angular when compared to other JavaScript client-side web frameworks. The main reason is in Angular, we use TypeScript. So compared to JavaScript, we have many features in Angular. So that is the reason why we are going to prefer Angular because of TypeScript when compared to other JavaScript related client-side frameworks for developing web applications. Right, so these are some technical reasons why we go for Angular when compared to other different types of client-side web frameworks, especially when compared to Angularjs. So Angularjs is a JavaScript client-side framework, whereas Angular is a TypeScript client-side web application framework. Okay, so AngularJS is client-side JavaScript web application framework. Okay, whereas Angular is client-side TypeScript. Instead of JavaScript, we are going to use TypeScript. So TypeScript web application framework. So TypeScript means JavaScript plus more features of programming. So simple here, TypeScript means JavaScript plus more features. So this is the reason why I prefer Angular TypeScript client-side web application framework when compared to other JavaScript frameworks. Right. Now, let us try to understand what are the building blocks of Angular. Okay, so we'll have a just general understanding what Angular consists of. Okay, right. So to understand what are the building blocks of Angular, so this is a general understanding. Okay, so it is too early to discuss technically what are the building blocks of Angular, but general understanding, Angular consists of components. In Angular, we are going to design and develop everything. We are going to design and develop everything in the form of components. Okay, so what is this component? So component, technically it is nothing but a class, but non-technically what is component? So inside a web page, everything is a component. So whatever we see inside a web page, that is a component as per Angular web application programming. Right. So we'll try to understand with a small diagram what is this components in Angular web application development. So for example, we'll try to take a small picture and try to understand with what is this component based. web application development using Angular. Right. So now in Angular, if you're developing any web page, for example, let us assume that you are developing a web page with header section. Okay. Next, you're developing a web page with left section, main section, footer section. Okay. So in header section, we'll have something like company logo and some sign up, sign in, account setting options. Coming to the left section. In the left section, for example, if you're developing a mail application, you will have inbox, outbox, sent items, compose, etc. Next, in the main section, so whenever you select inbox, so that inbox emails will be displayed in the main section. Whenever we select the sent items, so that sent items emails will be displayed in the main section. Okay, so these are known as components. So every section is one component in a Angular web application development. And coming to the footer section, so finally in the footer section we'll put something about the company, contact us, okay, feedback, etc. So every section what we develop in a web page, so that section is called as component. Okay, so technically Angular is a component based web application development. Right. So everything in a web page is a component. Next. Now second building block of Angular is modules. So modules are nothing but libraries. Like in C++, you have header files. Okay. Example, C or C++. We have header files. So header files means something like hash include. Okay. Now coming to Java. So in Java, you have packages. So packages like something like import. Okay. Now coming to .NET. In .NET, you have namespaces. So we say using followed by namespace. So group of related coding makes up a library. And that library in Angular, we call it as module. So what is the use of these modules? We have predefined modules. We can also create our own modules. So using modules, we can make our coding, we can make our development quick and fast. So that is what is a main building block of Angular. Next, templates. Now what is this template? So template is nothing but a view to the end user. And this view to the end user is mainly done using HTML and CSS. Okay, so here, so this is nothing but presentation of web page to the end user. So this presentation of web page to the end user is mainly done with HTML and CSS. So we can also use third-party CSS also, something like Bootstrap CSS. Okay, and whatever the different types of CSS frameworks are also there, can be integrated with Angular application. So that is what is the main advantage of Angular. So Angular is an application platform, so we can integrate other technologies into Angular application. So I'll just Angular is application platform. Okay, so application platform for UI technologies. So we can integrate other UI technologies like Bootstrap, CSS in Angular application. Okay, so any type of third-party CSS, any type of third-party JavaScript can also be integrated with Angular application. So this is what is templates. So the first one is components, second one is modules, third one is template. So I'll just put one: components, modules, templates. Next, the fourth one is decorators. So what is this decorators? Okay, so decorators provide extra information to Angular framework. They provide extra information to Angular framework. Okay, so these decorators are something like annotations in Java. So in Java, we have the concept of annotations, like we have @override, something like @webservlet. Okay, so annotations, they provide extra information of coding in a web page. Okay, so we'll discuss more about decorators in different topics. Okay, right. The next thing, 5, services. So what is the services? So services are reusable coding in Angular application. Reusable coding in our Angular application. So it is something like this. Okay, for example, so reusable coding means, for example, date and time. So if you want to display date and time in multiple components of our web application, then we have to go for services. So date and time service. So what is the use of this? Okay, so the main use is write once and reuse anywhere in our application. So these are services, reusable coding in our Angular application. So these are the 5 building blocks of developing Angular application. First one, components. Everything is a component in an Angular application. 2, modules. So group of related coding as a library makes up a module. 3, templates. Presentation of web page to the end user using HTML, CSS, and other third-party CSS or JavaScript libraries. And 4, decorators, providing extra information in our Angular application coding. And 5, services. So services are nothing but reusable coding or reusable content in an Angular application. So these are the 5 building blocks of developing any Angular application. Right. So next we'll try to understand what are the advantages of Angular when compared to Angularjs. Okay. Right. So first of all, Angular is not the upgraded version of Angularjs. Angularjs is separate and Angular is separate. So this we have to fix in mind. Okay. So Angularjs is separate and Angular is separate. So both are not same. Okay. Right. So Angular is completely rewritten in Typescript for developing dynamic web applications. So AngularJS is written in JavaScript, whereas Angular is written in TypeScript. So AngularJS is also used for dynamic web application, whereas Angular is used for developing dynamic web applications. Okay, so AngularJS is based on Okay, so one important technical point here, AJS is based on controllers. So controller means it is something like a function, something like a functions. We write everything as functions in AngularJS for developing dynamic web applications. Now coming to the Angular, in Angular is based on components. Angular is based on components. So that is, components means classes. So everything is represented as classes. So that's why we call Angular as component based developments. Component based development. So hence Angular is component based development, which is future of web application development. Everything we are going to write it as classes. Everything as classes. And classes contains both data as well as functionality. So this is what is Angular component based web application development. Okay, now Angular is implemented or written in Typescript. Okay, right, so there are many languages using which Angular can be implemented. Okay, right, so we'll try to understand that. So what are those languages? So more language choices for Angular. Okay, so we can develop Angular using Typescript. We can also use Dart scripting language, pure scripting language, ALM scripting language, etc. So these are other scripting languages like Typescript using which Angular can be implemented. Right, and finally Angular is a product from Google as well as Microsoft. Okay, so Google and Microsoft, so both are very well-known established company, so we'll have a strong R&D, research and development on Angular. Okay, and its libraries. So strong research and development on Angular and its library, so we can develop a very robust web applications using Angular because it is a product from Google and Microsoft. So that is the reason why we prefer Angular when compared to AngularJS. Right. So what is the speciality of Angular? We'll try to understand that. Okay. Angular with TypeScript. So what is the speciality? Okay. So what is the speciality of TypeScript in Angular? So there should be some speciality of TypeScript. So first of all, it is an open source. Okay. TypeScript is an open source scripting language. Okay. So open source scripting language which is developed by Microsoft, and this is developed in the year 1996. So it is developed in the year 1996, Microsoft. And two, it is a superscript of JavaScript. So what do you mean by superscript of JavaScript? Okay, right, it's very simple. Right, so we'll try to understand this here. It provides object-oriented features. So object-oriented features means we can use classes, objects, inheritance, abstraction, interfaces. So JavaScript plus extra features like object-oriented programming. So we can do more programming in TypeScript when compared to JavaScript for developing dynamic web applications. 3. In TypeScript, we have one small process known as transpilation. So what transpilation will do? So transpilation converts TypeScript into JavaScript. Means internally, whatever the code we write with TypeScript, it is automatically converted to JavaScript, and this JavaScript is used in our web application for dynamic content, because a web application or a web page should be displayed in the browser, and browser understands only JavaScript. Browser understands only JavaScript. So that is the main concern of this TypeScript getting converted into JavaScript. So till today, you take any browser, that browser understands only JavaScript. And what is the next specialty is, it is a strongly typed language. So in TypeScript, we have the concept of data types. So data types concept is not there in JavaScript. Okay, in JavaScript, we don't use the concept of data types with variables. Whereas in TypeScript, we have the concept of data types. It is a strongly typed language. So first one, free open source superscript of JavaScript. So JavaScript with extra features. Transpilation converts TypeScript into JavaScript because browser understands only JavaScript, and it is a strongly typed language. Right. And next, one small note point here. So every browser which is available in the market, like Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Safari. So browser supports only three things. 1, HTML, 2, CSS, and 3, JavaScript. So how TypeScript is understood in the browser? So TypeScript is understood in the browser, okay, with the transpilation process. So TypeScript is converted into JavaScript, and then a web page is displayed in the browser. And finally, less coding with more functionality in web page is possible through TypeScript. Okay. And coming to the versions of Angular. So we got the first version of Angular, okay, right, in 2014. It started in Europe Angular conference, October 23rd. And so Angular is not the upgraded version of Angularjs, but it has just been designated as Angular 2. Means Google is moving from Angularjs to Angular. That's why they have designated as Angular 2. And next, version 3 is skipped with some internal confusions in routing module. Okay, we'll discuss that later. Next, we got Angular 4 in 2016, Angular 5 2017, Angular 6 2018, Angular 7 2019. Next, Angular 8, we also got it in 2000. Yeah, sorry, this is 2018. Okay, Angular 7, right? And we got Angular 8, okay, in 2019. And the latest version of Angular is 9. We got it on February 6th, 2020. So we'll try to understand all these versions and different features of these when we get into the basics and fundamentals of Angular. Okay, right. So this is what is all about demo session 2. Right. And finally, before winding off this session, so our Angular session comprises of completely 45 to 50 sessions. Okay, and first 1 week will be the free TypeScript. So tomorrow I'm going to discuss how to work with TypeScript, what are the software requires for the TypeScript, and how to execute the TypeScript programs in a Windows machine. So the daily class will be 1 hour, okay, and every session will be recorded, and recordeds will be provided to the students for access and future reference. And these recording videos will be done on the daily basis, and they'll be shared in the Google Drive for 3 months to the students. And this is my Gmail ID from which I'm going to share the Google Drive videos, Angular 9 videos, srikan.sai.online gmail.com. Right, so that's all about the today's session, guys, in Angular 9 demo session 2. So thank you for listening to this session. Have a nice day.